What if I told you there is a Call of Duty game that exists, in fact actually two of them, that you probably have never seen or played but is right out there in front of you? What if I told you that there are Call of Duty games like Call of Duty Roman Warfare that were never released but quite literally nearly existed? That is where this brand new series comes in, called the Iceberg series. This is something I've had in my head for a while that hasn't quite come to fruition. Now, this series exists across YouTube, generally speaking, with conspiracy theories or the dark side of the internet, or kind of just dark, spooky stories. But I thought, why not bring this idea to the forefront with video games? Now, if you don't know the story behind this, typically people say that only about 10% of an iceberg can be seen above water. The other 90% is hidden underneath, and the further you go down, the less people have heard about it, and the less people have seen those things. And basically in this series, we're going to start at the top of the iceberg and talk about what the surface level of that topic is, and then go all the way down to the bottom of the iceberg, talking about the thing that almost no one knows about. Now, we can bring this video much beyond Call of Duty, talking about other games, maybe GTA, maybe Arc Raiders, or maybe more specific things in Call of Duty, like a specific game or character. So all I ask of you guys is, if you enjoy this video, please hit that like button, please subscribe, because I think this could be very, very cool moving forward. Also, these videos take a lot of work, research, editing, everything in between. So if you want to see more of them, please do hit that like button. But without further ado, this is the Call of Duty Iceberg. So on the surface, what is Call of Duty? This is a thing that everyone knows. Call of Duty is a long-running first-person shooter franchise known for fast-paced gunplay, cinematic campaigns, competitive multiplayer, with actually having over 500 million copies sold across the entire franchise. Call of Duty was first launched in 2003 and has released annually for 22, going on 23 years since. Now, originally, Call of Duty was focused in World War II. However, the series expanded to modern, even futuristic, and sometimes strange historical settings like the Vietnam War. Now, the mind-bending blockbuster storytelling has been known for some time and has been done certainly better at some times than others. Now, the franchise has had many twists and turns, but one thing is absolutely true. It remains stationary with a pillar of two different franchises, that being the Black Ops franchise, currently having 7 total games with it, and the Modern Warfare franchise currently having 6, going on 7 games with it this year. So that's what most people know about Call of Duty. But let's take things a little bit below the surface, just a little bit below. So this level is just below the surface, the thing that probably all of you guys know, but maybe not the overwhelming majority of the Call of Duty community. And this all starts out with the Call of Duty cinematic universe. You see, this began back with Modern Warfare 2019. Now, right at the beginning when this game was launched, this wasn't something they put front and center. And this was just the beginning of what we know as canon. Now, what I mean by this is the original Modern Warfare trilogy, Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare 2, and Modern Warfare 3 were all retconned out of this, and almost every other game was brought into this one cinematic universe. Now, the first piece of evidence that we had to tie all of this together was not in Modern Warfare 2019, but rather in the game that followed, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. You see, in that game, there is a mission where you go into the KGB, the Russian headquarters, and you run into someone by the name of Imran Zakhaev.
If you've not met him already, this is Imran Zakhaev.
Thank you, Secretary Gorbachev.
Now, we know this character as a villain from the Modern Warfare franchise. We also know that his son, Viktor Zakhaev, was one of the main bad guys in Warzone on Verdansk, therefore tying the entire Black Ops universe with this new Modern Warfare franchise that started in Modern Warfare 2019. So now there's 7 Black Ops games tied together with the new Modern Warfare 1, 2, and 3. But what about some of the spin-off games? First of all, we have Call of Duty Vanguard. We know that this game is included because of one character in particular by the name of Butcher. This character was once included in a Warzone story cutscene where we see him interact with the Black Ops characters like Mason, Woods, and Hudson. We also know that he founded the group known as Task Force Vanguard, which are the main characters within that game. Now, believe it or not, Call of Duty World War II is actually a prequel to Call of Duty Vanguard, and it's proven from Butcher once again as he connects the characters of Marcus Howard to Lewis, those two characters being connected together. Speaking of World War II, these are not the only World War II games that are connected, because the other one is Call of Duty World at War, because it is directly connected to Black Ops with the character of Viktor Reznov. Now, one game that's a little bit more tangentially related and maybe not for sure in the cinematic universe, but this is Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. You see, this game takes place far in the future, in the year 2187, and there's no solidified connections, aside from one bad guy that we actually have to assassinate by the name of Radislav Barkov. And in fact, this character is actually a side mission in the game. Now, why is that important? Because the main bad guy within Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 goes by the name of Roman Barkov, both of them having the same last name. So this pretty much ties in all of the Call of Duty games aside from that original trilogy, and the other one that as of right now does not have any connection is Call of Duty Ghosts. So that pretty much ties together the full Call of Duty cinematic universe. So let's go another layer deeper, because believe it or not, there's actually a lot of Call of Duty that is not in Call of Duty, and that is why level 2 below the surface here is about the Call of Duty comics. There's actually multiple set of comics as far as Call of Duty goes, most of which you probably don't know about. One of the oldest ones actually comes from Modern Warfare 2, the original Modern Warfare 2, because you see, this was a game that introduced a brand new character by the name of Ghost, or Simon Ghost Riley. Now, this was a masked character who is shrouded in mystery, and back in the day, they couldn't really do like spin-offs and backstories of these characters in an individual game because they were pushing forward a narrative. So there was a set of comics specifically about Ghost that gave his backstory. Now, it was also told in a way that also pushed forth the narrative of Task Force 141. So just to briefly describe this, Ghost breaks into a hostage situation in a school where he tells the story of a person who would become a ghost, someone who got involved with a Mexican drug cartel and then had beef with them and eventually killed some people within the army, hiding his identity, and therefore he became a ghost, someone who people believed was dead, but in reality, he was this kind of super soldier, and he eventually, by the end of these comics, joins Task Force 141, giving him an origin story that doesn't exist in a game. Now, this isn't the only time that this happened, because this happened once again with actually a more recent game, Call of Duty Vanguard. Now, one of the biggest problems I personally had with the story of Call of Duty Vanguard is you play as a group of soldiers by the name of Task Force Vanguard, but you don't actually get to find out how they actually came together as one. Well, it turns out there's a set of comics that follows each of the individual characters throughout Task Force Vanguard and basically tells you how they got recruited by Butcher to be a part of this task force who you play as within the game. And honestly, I think that the comic story would have been a better campaign than what was in the game. Now, things get even more weird when we move to Black Ops 4, because as we're going to talk about in a minute, Black Ops 4 did not have a campaign, but what it did have was a set of comics that gave backstory to each individual specialist character, which, by the way, were kind of in this time. Black Ops 4 was almost more of a hero shooter, and each of these specialist characters had their own backstory with world building, but none of that existed in the game because the game's campaign was canceled. And this brings us one level deeper in the iceberg, because in this next section, we are going to look at some development issues that has happened a couple different times throughout Call of Duty. The first of which is in Black Ops 4, because believe it or not, Black Ops 4 was originally planned to include a single player campaign, but it wasn't a traditional cinematic linear Black Ops game as we come to expect with Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, and even Black Ops 3. Treyarch was developing a co-op replayable narrative mode. Now, if that sounds familiar, Black Ops 7 has this, and it still didn't go very well. But this campaign was built around the game's specialist characters, as we talked about with the various different comic books. Each mission would focus on a different specialist, exploring their backstories, standalone operations, with player choice, loadouts, and abilities leaning more towards a PvE live service experience than a linear story. But things started to go wrong. The game didn't feel right and development of the campaign fell behind. This is when a little game known as Fortnite absolutely was taking off, and Call of Duty, specifically Activision, wanted to put their hands in that pocket. And within 16 months, the development of the campaign stopped and Blackout became the major priority. Resources were completely pulled from the campaign and then put directly into Blackout. Now, elements of the story and campaign can be seen within cutscenes of Black Ops 4, as well as the comic books that we saw as well. Things were repurposed into zombies, and the specialist lore was created. Blackout's environmental storytelling took parts of this and fragmented it into a narrative that never fully made sense, but you could tell they were planning something that we never got to see. Now, this absolutely wasn't the only time that development problems were in Call of Duty. If we go back even further, all the way to Call of Duty, the original Modern Warfare 2. You see, at this time, the reason why Call of Duty exploded was because of two developers, Jason West and Vince Zampella. These were the people behind Call of Duty 4 and Modern Warfare 2, and the founders of a little-known studio that you may be familiar with, Infinity Ward, the creators of the Modern Warfare franchise. But after the tremendous success of Call of Duty 4 and Modern Warfare 2, Vince Zampella wanted full control over what they were to make next, how long they would have to make it, complete control and freedom. But the leader of Activision, the person that owned at this point Infinity Ward, Bobby Kotick, was not okay with that. You see, at this point they invested about $5 million into Infinity Ward and controlled the rights of the game. But with the success of the games, Vince Zampella was fighting back, so therefore Bobby Kotick made a project known as Project Icebreaker to kick Jason West and Vince Zampella out from behind the studio. And eventually it ended up working. Espionage, emails, and literally interrogating employees to get these two out. And the reason they named is because they were working behind the scenes with EA to go and work for them, which apparently wasn't true at all. But after they got kicked out, they ended up winning a lawsuit against Activision, as well as a good portion of the employees at Infinity Ward did as well, having to pay out well over $42 million. And what's even crazier is by the end of this, Vince Zampella ended up going to work at EA, creating a new company by the name of Respawn, creating games like Titanfall, Apex Legends, and the Jedi Survivors game, and even going to work on the new Battlefield game before his untimely passing at the end of 2025. Call of Duty would never be what it was without this man, but the development issues were the main thing that I wanted to focus on here. And you see, there were many problems with Modern Warfare 2. Some of it, people look on it incredibly fondly as one of the best games of all time, but there were problems. One-man army noob tubes, commando knifing, a lot of things that people forget about. And the reason why these weren't fixed was because basically the entire studio was in a massive lawsuit with Activision at the time, most of them getting kicked out of the studio, and therefore them having problems actually getting to the next game, which would be Modern Warfare 3. With half the studio gone, Modern Warfare 3 would never become the masterpiece that Vince Zampella wanted it to be, and studios like Sledgehammer Games would have to be brought in just to complete it. Now, as you go a little bit further down, this is one that you've maybe heard of, and that's a little known game known as Black Ops Declassified. Now, if you haven't heard about this game, this was a Call of Duty game made for the PS Vita. And maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but there's a lot about this game that you probably don't know. It's rumored that it was made in 5 months. Now, we will come back to that one in a minute. This game is actually tremendously important when it comes to the overall story of the Black Ops universe. You see, this game follows the story of Frank Woods, Alex Mason, and Jason Hudson, but it looks back on their story. It comes from the perspective of someone by the name of Ryan Jackson as he goes through the team's files in the year 1991. Now, why is this important? Well, he's going through and kind of deciding whether or not these characters should be alive. You see, as we go back into the lore of Call of Duty, there's an operation known as Operation Cherubitus. which by the way does tie directly into zombies. But this operation is designed around sending someone by the name of Jonathan Blank to hunt down and kill Alex Mason, Frank Woods, Jason Hudson, and potentially even Gregory Weaver, killing them. Eventually this was stopped, and years later in Black Ops Declassified, Ryan Jackson ends up writing an entire report on the redacted files of this crew. So that's a cool little piece of lore, but what to me is even more interesting is apparently Black Ops Declassified was originally supposed to be a port of Call of Duty Black Ops 1 to the PlayStation Vita, but was so underfunded that they had to make their own game, which was then made in 5 months, and therefore we got Black Ops Declassified. So that's a game that we got, but as we move a layer deeper, we can then look at games that were canceled. So the first one that we have goes by the name of Call of Duty Roman Wars. Now this game was a concept by a company by the name of Vicarious Visions. Call of Duty Roman Wars was canceled in the year 2008 and would have came out around the time of Call of Duty World at War. Now, as I mentioned, this was a concept featuring a sword and shield style combat, elephants that you could ride, and Julius Caesar's 10th Legion being the kind of group of soldiers that you followed. Now, this is very different than the traditional Call of Duty FPS formula, and despite the feedback of this actually being pretty positive internally, it never came to be. Now, a couple years later, in the year 2010, there was another studio by the name of Underground Development. Now, the name before they were called that was known as Z-Axis, and the last game they worked on in 2009 was Guitar Hero Van Halen, but they were put on to create a new Call of Duty game. This game would go by the name of Call of Duty Devil's Brigade. It was actually a third-person shooter that you could reportedly go between first and third person, but using the D-pad, you would be able to instruct your teammates and squad on where to go and what to do. This game was set in World War II, focusing on a campaign in Italy. Now, the commands that you could give your teammates included assault, barrage, hold the line, form up, and even giving your teammates the order to go stealth kill enemies. Now, an early concept was created for this game, but it never went too far. Now, in my opinion, one of the more interesting canceled games goes by the name of Call of Duty Vietnam. And the interesting thing about this one is there's never been a fully dedicated Call of Duty game just to the Vietnam War, and based off of concept images, they are dark, dingy, gritty, and it was supposed to be made by Sledgehammer Games. Why it was never created is even more interesting. Again, this was around the year 2010, and at this time, this is when the whole Vince Zampella thing was going on, and basically the entire team of Infinity Ward got taken out. And because of that, there was no one there to work on Modern Warfare 3, and instead of following up with this concept of Call of Duty Vietnam, they got moved over and had to help create and publish Modern Warfare 3, and therefore, Call of Duty Vietnam was ultimately canceled, and some of the concept were eventually used and influenced later, specifically Black Ops games. Now, the canceled Call of Duty game that got furthest in development goes by the name of Call of Duty Future Warfare. Now, this was codenamed Call of Duty NX1, and you may have actually seen gameplay from this one before, as it was created by a company known as Neversoft. Yes, the company that would make like Tony Hawk games back in the day. Now, this game was set to come out around the year of 2013. And again, as I mentioned, was developed by Neversoft, who eventually got moved over to help finish Call of Duty Ghosts instead of releasing this. Now, this game was centered around an escalating space-age geopolitical conflict where multiple factions competed to take the control of the moon, one of which was known as the Eastern Coalition, and essentially they were made to be the Chinese military fighting against the Liberation Army, essentially the American Army, which also went by the name of the NLEA, or the National Lunar Energy Agency, and they emerged to control the energy energy that is created by the moon. Now, the player's character went by the name of John Walker and appears to have some major ties into the government as well. Now, this campaign was never fully finished, but there are fully or nearly fully completed missions, some of which actually take place on the moon with lower gravity. And in fact, what's interesting about this is there's also concept maps and designs for multiplayer for this game as well. This is the closest a game has been to being finished that never actually got released. And luckily, because of today's internet, we're actually able to see some of the gameplay of this one. Now, the next layer down, we're gonna have to dive a little bit more into Call of Duty's story. And you'll see what I mean by that as we go through, but it's all about the original Modern Warfare 3, because this game is really, really strange. In fact, for the marketing of this game, at the Call of Duty XP convention, which essentially is now Call of Duty Next, they played a live action short film by the name of Find Makarov Operation Kingfish. Now, I can't actually show you this because it is copyrighted, but I can show you some like still images as we go through it. Basically, in this, Task Force 141 and Delta Force in a joint operation go in to capture Vladimir Makarov. Now, as it turns out, this mission is actually taking place before Modern Warfare 2, which had already come out before this was put live. This was promotional for Modern Warfare 3. We'll come back to that in a second. But in this, Makarov is a step ahead. Basically, there ends up being a firefight, and by the very end, Captain Price ends up getting captured and taken to a Russian gulag. Now, this is interesting because in Modern Warfare 2, you end up rescuing Prisoner 627 from a Russian gulag, which ends up being Captain Price. So therefore tying Operation Kingfish to Modern Warfare 2. But what was weird is before this cutscene came out, people assumed that in the end of Call of Duty 4, when Captain Price ends up getting medevaced at the end of the game, somehow after that, he got put in a Russian gulag. That was never explained, and this was never put together until Modern Warfare 3. Now, some of these kind of cracks started to show in the narrative in this game, and it could be put up to the reason of Vince Zampella and Jason West, the leadership of Infinity Ward, disappearing, so maybe some of those narrative strands getting torn apart. But there is also one thing that was only found 2 years ago, and that is the Modern Warfare 3 alternate ending. You see, at the end of the original Modern Warfare trilogy, essentially what happens is you end up getting in a fight with Makarov playing as Captain Price. Makarov ends up killing Yuri, you wrap a kind of thing, a metal wire around him, and he falls to his death while you watch him hang there. Now, Captain Price then fades to black, and we never know whether or not he lived or died, but it pretty much puts an ending to the trilogy. There's no loose ends, if you will. However, there has been an alternate ending found years and years later, where as Makarov hangs there, in the background, a mysterious shadowy figure appears, walks in, evaluates what's going on, and walks off, almost as though there was supposed to be a Modern Warfare 4. And of course, this ending never saw the light of day, and we never got a Modern Warfare 4 until the series got rebooted, which is apparently going to be coming next year. Now, in the second to last layer, this is one that I had no idea about until I started making this, but several times Call of Duty has tried to get out of the limelight of just video games, and even moving into the future, they are currently working on a Call of Duty movie. But back in the day, around the year 2008, they were actually working on a trading card game. Yes, like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or any of those games that you may have collected cards for. Now, even though this never saw the light of day, it actually went pretty far in development, with Activision working with Upper Deck Entertainment. This was actually supposed to be a card game where two players would deploy soldiers from their deck, applying action cards to the battlefield, changing the way that cards would interact. It was literally supposed to be a card game that never came to fruition. Apparently, the project was canceled just a couple months before the expected release in 2008. Now, for the final layer, this is where I said at the beginning, there are two games that are essentially Call of Duty games, but not labeled Call of Duty, that were actually released, that you can play to this day, that I've never heard people talk about. The first of which is called the History Channel Battle for the Pacific. Now, this was not created by Infinity Ward or Treyarch, but rather a company by the name of Cauldron HQ, but it was published by Activision. Now, the first game here, yes, there are two of them, was called Battle for the Pacific and, well, took place in the Pacific. You started off in a special operation in Luxembourg and then went into several different missions in the Pacific later on, even going in to blow up Japanese Zeros with AA guns, and, well, it looks very, very similar to a Call of Duty game. This also came out on Xbox 360, PS2, and the Wii. Now, why did we never see more games like this one? Well, the main problem with it wasn't actually that the game was bad. It was that it was incredibly short, coming in at about 2 hours long, and that was the main reason why it received bad review scores. But this isn't the wildest game that came out like this. There was another one of these games that came out for Xbox 360 called The History Channel Civil War: A Nation Divided. Now, this game came out earlier in 2006, and it has sat around about a 50% review score, but this had many more missions. In fact, in this game, you played 6 missions as the North, 6 missions as the South, with the second to last mission being Cold Harbor, the final mission being Petersburg. Now, this all took place in the United States, and to my knowledge, is the only Call of Duty game, or really first-person shooter, that ever touches on the Civil War. Again, created by Cauldron HQ, and published by Activision. We were that close to having a Civil War Call of Duty game. So that is the Call of Duty Iceberg. Now, for this one, I focused mainly on the development with a little bit of a look at a couple of story elements from a couple of games, but this is definitely something we could do more of. If you enjoy these type of Iceberg videos, hit the like button. We can do it for other games, individual Call of Duty games, individual characters. I don't know. I think it's a really cool way of looking at story or elements from various different video games. So if you enjoyed it, hit the like button. Let me know what you think down in the comments and what you'd like me to cover in maybe a future episode down there below. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace.